You want to know which running backs will help you to victory in week 12 of fantasy football and who you should avoid? We're here to help talk about our start sit. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on the way out. We're here to help you each and every week. No buys this week, Chris, but it is Thanksgiving week. So we got 3 games on Thursday. That begs the question, what's more important, turkey or football?
Come on, nobody likes turkey. It's football 100%. This is the only day of the year anybody ever eats turkey. Come on.
I actually kind of like turkey, but let's save that for another debate. We'll do a separate start sit on Thanksgiving sides. Let's talk about running back. Who do you like heading into this all-important Week 12? Playoffs are just around the corner.
Yeah, my first must start is a guy who seemed like a must start the last 2 weeks, but hasn't really delivered, and that's Duke Johnson from Houston. Seemed like after David Johnson went to IR, he was just going to be an every week RB2. Has not been the case. He's been really bad, but it doesn't matter because he gets Detroit this week, and every single running back that plays Detroit pretty much just smashes. So I expect Duke Johnson to do the same. This defense is horrendous. We saw Mike Davis last week after 5 not so great games, came back and had a great game against Detroit. So if you picked up Duke Johnson or you've been playing him every week and been frustrated, don't give up. Give him one more chance because this is the week he will go off.
I would hope so. If you're a Duke Johnson owner, you definitely want that. In this matchup, Detroit has given up 19 touchdowns just to running backs in 10 games. So even if Duke doesn't necessarily break out on the ground, there's a good chance he scores, and you definitely want that in your lineup. All right, so I'm going to go with the guy who also actually disappointed last week. I know you watched a lot of that game, Chris. It wasn't pretty if you were a Falcons fan or if you had Todd Gurley in your lineup. But don't worry, this is a different matchup now, going against the Raiders. And I know the Raiders were horrible on the ground as far as defense the first 4 weeks. And then they've turned it around. It's been a lot tougher, but they are still giving up touchdowns, giving up the second most rushing touchdowns, in fact, right behind the Detroit Lions. Todd Gurley, he lives off touchdowns. We know he's not going to probably put up too many 100-yard games from here on out. But he's a guy who is still a decent offense most weeks, going against a slightly lesser defense this week. Good chance he finds the end zone, and it should be a closer contest. Also, if Julio Jones doesn't go, which is possible, they're going to have to lean on Gurley more.
Yeah, Gurley couldn't score last week because the Falcons couldn't even get close to the red zone, the end zone, the goal line. It was awful offensive performance. So definitely like him to bounce back this week in a much better matchup against the Raiders. And then my next must start is Nick Chubb. I know it was frustrating last week. Nick Chubb was racking up the yards, looked way better than Kareem Hunt, but then they get down to the 1-yard line and they would just keep handing the ball off to Kareem Hunt over and over and over and over until he finally scored a touchdown. Very frustrating if you have Nick Chubb, no doubt about it. But here's the thing. Don't worry about that. In the 2 weeks since he's been back from injury, he's gotten 19 and 20 carries. We know this is what Cleveland wants to do. They want to run the ball. He's a lock for 20 carries. And we've been talking about Jacksonville. Early in the year, they were terrible against the run. They've gotten better against the run, but they did just give up over 100 yards to Pittsburgh last week. James Conner had an okay game against them. I think he had 89 yards on the ground. So don't give up on Nick Chubb. Don't worry about him not getting the goal line work. I think that changes because Kareem Hunt was very good with the goal line work last week. Start Nick Chubb everywhere you got him.
Yeah, there are a few guys that we just say you start every week regardless of matchup. I think Chubb fits that category, especially a running back. It was really frustrating, to see Kareem Hunt, if you did have Chubb, to see Kareem Hunt continue to get the ball, fed to him at the goal line. But don't worry, Chubb will do just fine, I think. Now, I'm going to go with a guy that hasn't played for a while. The word is Chris Carson will be back. Of course, we know how that goes. Be ready to pivot again, possibly to Carlos Hyde. But all signs point to Carson now having extra time to get ready. Of course, they played Thursday last week. Now they play Monday night this week, week 12. He should be good to go. Not a great matchup on paper per se against the Eagles. Eagles usually have a fairly good run defense, but Carson has been feeding to get back onto the field. They're going to give him the ball. And I wonder, when people keep saying, what's the difference between Russ, those first few weeks when he was the MVP and they were winning every game and he was cooking, and then all of a sudden, he's struggling and turning the ball over. It's not a coincidence that it just so happened that he was turning the ball over when Chris Carson was out of the lineup and the running game wasn't there for them. All right. So they're going to give Carson the ball. This isn't necessarily the kind of game that's going to be a shootout. I don't think Russ is going to go for 300 plus yards necessarily. I think they're going to keep the ball on the ground as much as possible. So if Chris Carson is on your team, you've been waiting to get him in your lineup, do it. No questions asked.
Yeah, it's going to be great to finally have Carson back. And this Seattle defense, with the addition of Carlos Dunlap, has been playing better. And Carson Wentz has been playing horrendously bad. So you got to think Seattle should be in control in this one late in the game, which could be a lot more Chris Carson running the ball to run out the clock there. So definitely big fan of Chris Carson in week 12. And then my final must start is a guy you mentioned on your waiver wire video, and that's James White. So James White kind of made a little resurgence in week 11 with 6 catches. Rex Burkhead, unfortunately, suffered a season-ending knee injury. So that means you're looking at Damian Harris, who really doesn't catch any passes, Sonny Michel, who really doesn't catch any passes, and James White, who catches a lot of passes as the Patriots backfield. And they got a matchup with Arizona. One thing about Arizona, well, a couple things about Arizona. Number one, they play really fast. So New England's going to run a lot more plays than they typically do. And number two, this isn't going to be a game where New England can just run the ball and control it. They're probably going to have to throw a lot to keep up with this Arizona offense. I expect James White to be involved heavily. So in standard leagues, I mean, not as excited about James White, but in any kind of PPR format, I love James White this week.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know what New England wants to do with this iteration of the Patriots is control the ball right on the ground, run, and, rely on their defense. Well, what's going to happen this week? You really think they're going to shut down Arizona's offense? I don't think so. I think a lot of passing, a lot of James White. And then my last must start is a guy who also I've been mentioning, I think on the waiver wire last 3-4 weeks in a row, and I just don't understand why nobody's picking him up. Wayne Gallman of the Giants. I know because it's the Giants, right? He's no Saquon Barkley, but he doesn't have to be. He's the main running back there. There's nobody else really getting a lot of touches. He's scoring a touchdown basically every game. He has 5 touchdowns the last 4 games, and this is an even better spot than those last few games he's been scoring. Guess the Bengals, who I think we're going to talk about that matchup a lot in all these videos, is, the Bengals, unfortunately, I mean, really tragic that Joe Burrow, after such a great season, that team, you saw how they let down. It's just going to be, even against the Giants, I think it's just going to be a massive letdown performance for them. I think Gallman has his way against what has been actually a bad Bengals running defense all year anyways.
Totally agree. And like the Chris Carson matchup, you got to think, I mean, I know the Giants are bad, but the Bengals without Burrow are going to be much worse. So you got to think the Giants should be in control in this one, which means a lot of Wayne Gallman down the stretch.
All right, let's get to our must-sits. Who are some running backs you do not like this week?
Yeah, I mentioned this guy last week, and he had an okay game. I mean, he did better than I expected him to do, and that's James Conner, even in an even tougher matchup this week against Baltimore. The last time they played Baltimore, he only had 47 yards on the ground. He did save his day with a touchdown, which, he can always score a touchdown, but I really feel like with James Conner, you are banking on a touchdown. If he does not find the end zone this week, it's unlikely he's going to get you much of anything. You're talking about a 4, 5, 6-point game, maybe a 10-point ceiling here without a touchdown. So I'm looking to bench James Conner if I can.
Yeah, it's like we never know what we're getting with Conner these days, right? Even in a couple of really good spots, the previous couple of weeks, he didn't do anything. And then finally he came through against Jacksonville, which how hard is that to do? But yeah, this is not a favorable matchup. So again, if you have somebody better to pivot to, like maybe some of the guys we just mentioned. All right, I'm going to go with a guy who had a huge week last week out of nowhere because he had done nothing for, I don't know, most of the season, I guess I would say. Melvin Gordon really makes you wonder what the Broncos were thinking adding him when Philip Lindsay has actually been better all year. But anyways, Melvin Gordon, yeah, he had a nice game against the Dolphins. That was a kind of an upset there. Don't see it happening against the Saints. You saw how effective that Saints run defense was last week, completely shutting down a guy I mentioned in Todd Gurley. I think they can do it to Melvin Gordon. They can shut down Todd Gurley. And the Saints team, you see what they're doing now with Taysom Hill. They're going to control the ball, right? It's not going to be chuck the ball down the field too much, although Hill did that a little bit. But still, I feel like Gordon is due for a massive letdown game. Don't let that one outlier kind of convince you into thinking all of a sudden he is a starting fantasy running back. Because in this particular week, I don't see it happening. The Saints have been one of the top 5 run defenses all year long.
Yeah, it just shows you how unpredictable fantasy football can be, or football in general can be week to week when Melvin Gordon comes out of nowhere and has a monster game like that. But usually when that happens, they go back to their normal ways and don't do much. And I agree with you. I don't think Melvin Gordon is going to do anything this week. Cannot be started. And then my final must sit is Ronald Jones. He has those explosion games and then he has those nothing games. And the problem for Ronald Jones is he's not involved in the passing game. Somehow Leonard Fournette is their pass catching back. You saw it last night. Well, you're recording this Tuesday, so you saw it on Monday night when they were behind, when they were in throw it mode. It's Leonard Fournette out there, not Ronald Jones. He's just basically getting carries. Only had 10 carries Monday night against the Rams. I know you look at the matchup and you say, oh, it's Kansas City. It's going to be high scoring. Josh Jacobs got a touchdown against them. Running backs do okay against them. I don't care. You cannot start Ronald Jones. You have to be extremely desperate to start Ronald Jones. He's going to have to rip off a big run or find the end zone a couple of times to pay off for you, and I'm not willing to take that chance. No thank you on Ronald Jones.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's deceiving. You look at total fantasy points or fantasy standing ranking, at running back, and Jones is up there. You think, oh, he's an RB2. It's all or nothing with him, right? In a good matchup, you roll him out. In a bad matchup, you just outright bench him. And it's very clear, like you said, that's exactly right. Fournette is the pass catching back. If they're winning, Jones is in, or if it's tied. If they're losing, Fournette comes in. Going against the Chiefs, I don't feel so good that the Bucs are necessarily going to have a lead the whole time. And then my final must sit, we'll talk about the Chiefs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, talk about back to normal. We were kind of joking about this all, on Sunday. It's been nothing ever since Le'Veon Bell came. It's been nothing for Edwards-Helaire, nothing. I said, well, this is just going to be his week. And guess what? It was his week apparently for I don't know what particular reason against the Raiders. We talked about that defense. Maybe that's why, because they give up so many touchdowns to running backs. Gave up 2 to Edwards-Helaire, and he did get involved a little bit more than usual because he did have 14 carries for 69 yards. But again, this is going to be going against a top 3 run defense in Tampa. And I just don't feel like it's going to be a Clyde Edwards-Helaire week. I think it's going to be a Pat Mahomes week. So I feel like don't look at last week's stats. Oh, he's back. He's not. This is going to be another outlier. I think it's another Melvin Gordon situation. Don't feel bad putting Edwards-Helaire on your bench. I don't think it'll be disappointing.
Yeah, on Sunday, I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh, man, of course Pierre is going to give it to me after our little debate on Sunday morning. But he didn't really do anything in the second half of that game. It was all in the first half. In the 2-minute, when they were running the 2-minute offense, it was Darrell Williams and Le'Veon Bell out there, not Edwards-Helaire. And Tampa Bay, I mean, their secondary is not as good as it was in the beginning of the year. That pass rush isn't as good, but that run defense is legit. We saw them. They shut down that Rams running attack completely. So I agree with you. It's going to be Mahomes and the wide receivers and Travis Kelce and not the running backs.
Yeah, I think with Edwards-Helaire, you're hoping for a touchdown. And again, I feel like a lot more likely to happen with a guy like Todd Gurley than Edwards-Helaire. So, all right, guys, that does it for running back starts at week 12. Enjoy some turkey, or if you're not into that, at least have some stuffing, mashed potatoes. But enjoy Thanksgiving week of football. And of course, don't miss Endgame Live on Sunday morning. We'll answer all your start sit questions about any of the guys we've covered and so much more. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button.